I grew up as a kid in Mumbai who completely struggled in school. Retaining information felt impossible, and I was convinced I was just a slow learner. Graduating from MIT and advising billion-dollar companies happened because I developed a system to exploit my brain's actual wiring and learn faster than everyone around me. The reason most traditional studying fails comes down to basic biology. Your prefrontal cortex, the CEO function of your brain, handles all new theories and ideas, but it is metabolically expensive. Every new concept you force into it spikes a massive demand for glucose and oxygen. Think of this region as a tiny 4-ounce cognitive bowl. If you dump a gallon of theory into it, the brain can still only hold those 4 ounces. The vast majority of that information simply spills over the side and is lost. In a world where today's AI can run millions of processes in parallel, raw intelligence has become a commodity. Your only permanent advantage is possessing a biologically optimized system to process information and stay ahead. We are going to replace chaotic cramming with a structured, calendar-blocked system I call the 3C learning sprint. Before we begin, pause the video. Grab your specific learning material, a digital timer, a blank piece of paper, and your calendar app. The first rule is that we are not going to try and consume all of this material in one sitting. That is exactly how the system breaks down. Defining these exact parameters and setting up your physical environment gives your brain a boundary. It's the mandatory first step you have to take before a single piece of new knowledge is consumed. The first step is to compress. If you watch Magnus Carlsen sitting down at a chessboard, he isn't thinking about one specific piece. Cognitive studies estimate grandmasters can internalize up to 100,000 board configurations. They compress what they've learned into larger patterns their brains can actually handle, rather than memorizing individual moves. They do this because our working memory is incredibly limited. Recent research shows your brain can only juggle about 4 independent ideas at a time. Any more than that, and it starts dropping information. Look at your material right now and start with selection. Ask yourself, what is the 20% of this text that will give me 80% of the benefit? Isolate those key chapters or sections and ignore the rest for now. Next, take those selected ideas and chunk them. On your blank paper, sketch a basic model or metaphor that connects this new information to an old concept you already know. By compressing before you consume, you prevent cognitive overload. You are taking many scattered ideas and reducing them into fewer, stronger patterns that your brain's working memory can easily carry. Step 2 is to compile. Merely hoarding and consuming information does not lead to mastery. Memory alone is not enough to actually use what you've learned. To master the material, you have to manage your learning cadence using the ultradian cycle. This is the biological rhythm that dictates your brain's capacity for sustained focus, followed by its mandatory need for recovery. Open your calendar app right now and block out exactly 110 minutes for your learning sprint. Protect this block ruthlessly. Now, divide it. You are going to allocate the first 90 minutes for peak focus, and the final 20 minutes strictly for rest. Inside that 90-minute working window, abandon the habit of studying for 6 weeks before taking a test. Instead, adopt an agile approach. Build a tight loop. Learn a concept, then immediately test yourself. Learn, test. Learn, test. If you are learning a physical skill, test it using the slow burn. Execute every micro movement at an excruciatingly slow pace so your brain registers every detail. Then use immersion. Step away from practice and test it in a real-world environment where the pressure is on. For theoretical knowledge, use the BOSS tool, teach to learn. Stand up and lecture the material to an empty room, pretending you are giving a presentation. Try explaining it from a few different angles. Running these tight, immediate testing loops forces your brain to actively compile and output the data. It exposes the gaps in your understanding right now, instead of 6 weeks later during a final exam. The final step is to consolidate. Real learning happens in 2 distinct stages. While stage 1 is the focused work we just completed, stage 2, mandatory rest, is where the information actually wires into your brain. Start with micro rests. During your 90-minute focus block, right after you finish reading or testing a heavy concept, pause for just 10 to 20 seconds. Research shows that during those short pauses, your brain subconsciously replays the information you just learned at up to 20 times the speed. You get dozens of free repetitions just by staring at the wall for a moment. Then comes the macro rest. The moment your 90-minute timer goes off, you must immediately transition into the 20-minute block we scheduled earlier. This is your non-sleep deep rest, or NSDR. The rules for NSDR are strict. You lie down or sit comfortably, close your eyes, and do absolutely nothing. No checking your phone, no podcasts, zero media input. It is incredibly tempting to keep pushing through and keep studying, but avoiding that temptation is critical. This downtime is the biological mechanism your brain uses to permanently wire the memory into place. You now have a complete calendar-blocked sprint. You've filtered the material, actively tested your understanding, and built in the precise rest needed to lock it all in. When you sit down to actually use these testing and teaching tools, you are going to feel friction. You might stumble on your words or feel like you are failing to grasp the concept fast enough. Carnegie Mellon University tested an adaptive learning system that actively made the material more difficult based on the students' progress. The students hated the friction, but they ended up learning twice as much as those taking the standard, easier tests. Neuroscience actually calls this the generation effect. The harder your brain has to work to generate the answer, the deeper that neural pathway is encoded. Your brain doesn't hate the struggle, it hungers for it. Stop racing against other people's timelines. There will always be someone who seems to read faster or memorize quicker. Instead, embrace the friction as a sign of biological growth. Honor the 3C protocol rhythm and give your brain the time it needs to build mastery.